Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island is easily the most well-known and infamous of the 5 not Nickelodeon collection cartoons. Although the other 4 cartoons in the collection are extremely obscure, there's a very good chance that you've probably heard of Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island at some point before. I'm sure most of you have heard about how this show is a SpongeBob ripoff and whatnot, how Rob Paulsen, who provides the voice for the titular character, regrets this role and it's one of the very few roles that he regrets doing, that sort of thing. I'm sure you've heard of it before. I wanted to go into this show and come out of it thinking, hey, this wasn't as bad as everyone said it was. I really wanted to do that. I wanted to give this show a bit of a chance. Like, SpongeBob's similarities aside, I could see this being a pretty good show, and I really wanted to walk out of it thinking, hey, this wasn't as bad as people made it out to be. Unfortunately though, that ended up not being the case. Although Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island is far from the worst thing I've seen on this series, it's still not very good. For starters, let us just discuss the similarities to SpongeBob. The titular Coconut Fred is very similar to SpongeBob in that they're both very hyperactive, energetic, happy-go-lucky characters. In Coconut Fred, there are these 2 banana brothers that are like idiots, and I guess they could be the Patrick of the show. I don't know. There's also this watermelon character and this lemon sailor character that I guess could both be considered the Squidward of the show. Mainly the melon character, as he's like grumpy and he gets annoyed by Coconut Fred's antics and whatnot, very similar to how Squidward gets annoyed with SpongeBob. In addition, the main cast also includes this tiny cherry, this wild, ferocious strawberry, and this apple bully, all of which are original characters as far as I'm aware, so, you know, you gotta give credit to the show for not being 100% a ripoff of SpongeBob when it comes to the characters. You could probably say that the apple bully character is a ripoff of Flats the Flounder, but I'd say that's stretching it. I'm pretty sure like almost every cartoon in the 2000s had that one bully character in it, and Coconut Fred was no exception to this. But the thing is though, it's not even just the characters of the show that are similar to SpongeBob, there's just certain elements from SpongeBob that are just taken and put into this show. You know how in SpongeBob they have those like weird detailed close-ups and whatever? Yeah, something like that is in this show. It actually caught me by surprise, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't think that these would be ripped off from SpongeBob. One episode involves the gang going to like this gated community that's just, it's straight up f***ing Squidsville. Like, you have the giant gate that opens up, and then like inside is this neighborhood with like houses that all look the same, and in Squidsville it's full of these characters that look like Squidward, and in this show it's characters that look like the strawberry character. It's like, it's crazy. I mean, that's really where the similarities to Squidsville ends, but still. One episode feels very similar to ARG in that they get a treasure map from a fruit cereal and they start looking for the buried treasure on the map. They try to find the X. When they find the treasure, these 3 pirates that are like part of the cereal appear and they're on a floating ship. And it's like, it's super similar to the Flying Dutchman. When I first went into this, I thought the SpongeBob similarities would just be limited to, okay, you have the main character who's hyperactive and happy-go-lucky and whatever, and then you got the grumpy character who doesn't want to take part in it at all, and then you got like the idiot best friend or friends for Coconut Fred's case, and like that's it really. But this is surprisingly more of a copycat of SpongeBob than I initially thought. At the same time though, I still wanted to be fair to this show. I wanted to look at it past the whole like SpongeBob ripoff stuff and give it a fair chance. I wanted to go out of this show thinking, okay, you know what, yeah, there are similarities to SpongeBob, but it's not bad. It's not as bad as people said it was. And as I said before, this isn't the worst cartoon I've seen on this series, but it's also far from the best one. I genuinely wanted this to be like not as bad as people made it out to be. I wanted this to be like kind of a good show, but I guess not. This isn't going to be another Problem Solvers situation where the show is actually nowhere near as bad as people made it out to be. The main character, Coconut Fred, is honestly pretty annoying, I must say. I don't want to be disrespectful to Rob Paulsen or anything like that, but his voice as this character, it can get pretty grating at times. The overly energetic, hyperactive character of Coconut Fred can get pretty annoying eventually, and the whole show in general just kind of has like an obnoxious tone to it. It didn't really affect me that much at first, but then as I kept watching more episodes, it really started to get to me a little bit. I mean, it never got to the point where it's like, I hate this show, and I think it's like one of the worst cartoons ever made, but it definitely did hinder whatever enjoyment I could have potentially had watching this show. This show only lasted 25 episodes to my knowledge, from 2005 to 2006. It aired on Kids WB. Fun fact, this show premiered on the same day as Johnny Test and Lunatics Unleashed, that weird, edgy Looney Tunes cartoon that nobody remembers. September 17th, 2005 will forever be a historical day for animation. This was the Barbenheimer of animation. This was Barbenheimer before Barbenheimer. It's so ironic to me how like Johnny Test was the only one of these three shows that was actually good, and then like eventually it became bad as the years went by. Speaking of Johnny Test, I noticed from time to time there's these whip crack sound effects in Coconut Fred, and all I could think of was Johnny Test, and that's it. It's even more funny considering the fact that, like, when Johnny Test started, the whip crack sounds were nowhere to be heard. It wasn't until, like, much later on into the show that the whip crack sounds became more present. So it turns out that Coconut Fred was the one that started the whip crack stuff and not Johnny Test. What a shocker. I only sat through 5 of the 25 episodes. It was pretty apparent by the time I got to like the 3rd episode that I was not going to watch all 25 episodes of the show. However, there is one episode that I wish to talk about specifically. Sir Not a Lot, the 3rd episode of Season 2. This episode is a video game parody. You have Coconut Fred, who's dressed up as Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII. The aforementioned Banana Brothers are dressed up like Mario and Luigi. The Watermelon Squidward character is dressed up as Princess Peach. And the Apple Bully character is not dressed up as Bowser, but is instead dressed up as Sephiroth. Yes, seriously. At the end of the episode, there's a Donkey Kong reference included, but that's kind of it. I really wish they went further with the video game references. At the same time though, the fact that it's only Mario and Final Fantasy VII that are parodied is honestly really f***ing funny to me, especially considering the fact that like I could just imagine like a kid watching this when this came out in like 2006, and it's like, don't get me wrong, Final Fantasy is a famous video game franchise. Final Fantasy VII is one of the most famous video games of all time, but like compared to like Mario, it's kind of niche in a way. Like any kid that watches this is gonna recognize the Mario references. Do you think any kid watching this is gonna know who the f this is supposed to be? They're gonna be confused as to why it's not Bowser or anything like that. And it actually doesn't even make sense. Like if you're gonna have this like save the princess stuff, I mean, it wouldn't really be appropriate for Final Fantasy, but like they could have at least made it Aerith or Tifa or like anything like that. I don't know. Instead of Princess Peach, they could have just made this a complete Final Fantasy episode instead of Mario and Final Fantasy VII. I guess this episode is for that one specific person out there in the world that ships Princess Peach and Sephiroth together. Sure, whatever floats your boat, I guess. The whole episode just feels like a really weird Mario Final Fantasy VII crossover fan fiction that someone wrote. It would honestly be less bizarre if there were other video games referenced alongside Mario and Final Fantasy VII. Stuff like Sonic and The Legend of Zelda and whatever, Pac-Man, you know, getting referenced. That would be like it would feel less weird, less bizarre, but at the same time, it's kind of perfect the way that it is. Just these two video games, the only video games that exist, Super Mario Bros. And Final Fantasy VII. It's crazy. The fact that the episode is named Sir Not a Lot, just, it makes it even better. It's just the cherry on top, if you will. Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island is, again, I think I've said this a lot, but it's not the worst cartoon I have ever seen. I could actually see this being a good cartoon, which is something that I very rarely say about the cartoons that I look at on this series. And there's a very high chance that this is the only cartoon in the Not Nickelodeon collection that I can say this about. But there are things that I do like about this show. I really like the art style it has. It has a very colorful, charming art style. I think the reason why I wanted to go into this and think it's like better than people made it out to be is because of how much I adore the art style of the show. Honestly, the only real issue that I have with this show is it's just kind of obnoxious at times. The character of Coconut Fred can be a little too hyperactive, and yeah, it could be obnoxious at times. It never gets to a point where, like, I really hate the show or anything like that, but I could definitely see how it could be grating for some people. Aside from that, though, I don't really have much of a problem with the show. I don't even have a problem with the SpongeBob similarities, because I kind of find them funny in a way with how blatant it is. It would be one thing if it was just the character tropes are similar, but you got like super specific stuff from SpongeBob, like the detailed close-ups and the gated community from Squidsville that are just ripped off, and it's like, it's funny to me. I can't really get angry at it. It's funny to me how blatant of a ripoff this show is of SpongeBob. This is not me saying that this is a funny bad cartoon. This is just me making an observation. I just find this to be a mostly mediocre but still kind of obnoxious, not very good show. I guess, yeah, it's not as bad as other cartoon YouTubers make it out to be. It's watchable. For what it's worth, there is a very high chance that this will end up being the least bad of the 5 not Nicktoons that I'm going to be looking at, so just keep that in mind as we go on, that this is likely the peak of the collection. Just keep that in mind. Oh yeah, one more thing before we move on to the next cartoon. Fun fact, contrary to popular belief, Rob Paulsen, who, as I said before, provided the voice of Coconut Fred, does not actually regret voicing Coconut Fred or Bubsy, which is another role that he's infamous for, and that many people claim he regrets that role as well. It turns out that's not the case. He does not regret doing these two roles at all. He goes into detail about it in a 2019 Q&A, which I'm going to play a clip for right now. I'll leave the full Q&A in the description below for you to see, but it's at the very end of the Q&A.
I think he has a new game.
And the reason I'm not involved is not because I don't want to be. They hired somebody else. I got nothing against Bubsy. Thank you for asking.
So, at the very least, not worse than Coconut Fred, right?
No. And I didn't have any problem with Coconut Fred either. Coconut Fred, by the admission of the producers, was nothing short of their version of SpongeBob. Coconut Fred. So instead of having a talking sponge that lives in the water, we got a talking coconut who, you know, whatever. But it was great. I love my job. Are some shows more fun than others? Yes. But, dude, if anyone, on the internet too, if any of you ever see me or any actor complaining about getting a nice paycheck for doing something, we go, smack them.
I was actually quite surprised by this, I'm not even gonna lie. I was originally going to include a segment talking about how he regrets this role and he regrets voicing Bubsy in that failed pilot, but it turns out no, he doesn't regret doing either role, which I thought was an interesting thing to bring up in this video, so we could just debunk that. If there's anyone watching this that still thinks Rob Paulsen regrets voicing Coconut Fred, then, well, that's not true anymore. You heard it from the man himself. So anyways, with all of that said, allow me to move on to the next cartoon in the Not Nickelodeon collection.